Okay. Damn it. So I can't figure out how to turn my damn phone horizontally to live stream. God. YouTube's a bitch in so many ways. All right. Okay, so here we are. My usual filming venue here. So yeah, I want to talk about November today. Man, am I late, but it's been a hell of a friggin' a hell of a month. Um, that eclipse season was it was interesting, transformative. You know, many of you may have noticed, around so the eclipses, the solar on October 14th and then the lunar on the 28th. A lot of mania, chaos, all that fun stuff during those days. And shit. Okay. Yeah, I've been off my usual routines, and I definitely like some variety, but my routines are very my routines kind of keep the wheels on my life, you might say. I've got a lot of strong Saturn influence. So, yeah, I was out of town for a week at the end of October, and we're getting the floors here, the wood floors in the house refinished. Had to get everything out of the house. Still moving shit back in. It's been an adventure, so life has been a little chaotic and up in the air. And didn't really prep the video before I left town. But, here we are. So, with respect to all of your time and to my time, I want to work out. I don't want to sit on my ass here. And I like making these videos, but I don't want to take too much time. So, with respect to all of our time, what's the deal with November? November this year, 2023, we're going to see there's going to be more anger. There's going to be more, more media exposure here of deep staters, corporate clowns, just more exposure of all the agendas that I've been running. More insight into the whole 2020 to 2022 event, the Wuhan Cooties event, and then the truth behind side effects of the prickly pear. So I'm going to follow the example of some other people with larger followings on YouTube that I've been watching. Apparently YouTube is catching on to the term the needlecraft. Then they're starting to understand what needlecraft is. So we're not going to say needlecraft anymore. We're going to say the prickly pear. So I think it means it has sharp little and poke your skin, can puncture your skin. So prickly pear, a pear is a fruit, and a prickly pear, basically that fruit has little spines, little projections that can pierce your skin. So the prickly pear is going to be the substitute term for needlecraft. Or maybe I can just call it needlecraft. I don't know. Maybe I'll just use the two. So anyway, you're going to see more of what's going on there. I think we're going to see the side effects of the prickly pear, aka needlecraft, coming out. People with just coming down with crazy health problems. Not everybody who got it, but especially people who got involved in the hate fest against Orange Man, against Mr. Trump. Now, yeah, this guy's a narcissist, can't argue that. But, the media, starting in 2015, got this whole hate fest rolling, which was a hex. I'm always talking about this. I'm going to keep talking about it. It was a hex against him. So the media got people wishing him death, illness, bankruptcy, imprisonment. People he'd never done anything to. Millions of people he'd never done anything to personally. So when you wish those things on someone, you're hexing them. If the person hasn't harmed you directly, your hex, that malicious energy cannot go to that person you're hexing. It bounces back, or another way to look at it, it just stays inside your mind and it poisons your mind and your body. So right after, a few years into the hate fest, the media hate fest against, Mr. Trump, aka Orange Man, then the prickly pear, the emergency happened, the cooties emergency happened, and then the needlecraft prickly pear came out, and some people have had, I think, 9 of them at this point. So if they engaged in a hate fest, this could have health consequences. People who didn't, people who did it out of concern for other people, and they basically did it out of love and didn't get involved in the hate fest, they're going to fare much better. A lot of those people are going to be fine. So, but yeah, what's going on here on the 28th of this month, 28th of November 2023, we're having a node change in sidereal astrology, so invisible sky astrology. So the nodes, Rahu and Ketu, dragon's head, dragon's tail. This is the karmic axis. These are the shadows that cause the eclipse. They're always in opposite signs. So they're both having a sign change. Rahu, the dragon's head, going from Aries to Pisces. And they're always in retrograde. They never move direct. Ketu, the dragon's tail, moving from Libra to Virgo. So, especially with Ketu, Ketu is a portal that liberates us from life in this world, brings us to the spirit world, helps us let go of things as well in this world. And it's a significator of death because death is a liberation from the 3D Earth School experience. So having that node of the moon go to Virgo, Virgo is caregivers, healthcare, the public health system. Having that there can significate liberation, death, hospitalization through the public health system. Now, K2 is also a significator of extremism, religious fundamentalism, terrorism, ideological extremism. It's not just religious, it can be secular, communist, socialist, any wing, right wing, left wing, just any sort of extremist ideology K2 can deal with. K2 symbolized by a body without a head. So it doesn't, when it gets out of balance, it's not thinking and it goes way over the top. So you can also see, people just having like a renewed, and this is not going to be a lot of people, but you're going to see some people having a renewed zeal, a renewed enthusiasm for the needlecraft, for face diaper wearing, for mask wearing, and looking for a government savior that's going to save them from the cooties crisis. So yeah, we're going to learn a lot more about the truth of that whole 2020 event. So more of that's coming. There's going to be more drama in the media, more damning shit about Mr. Biden, President Biden. An interesting thing too is you're starting to see his own party really turn on him. So I don't know what the fuck is going to happen with him within the last year and a half. He's had 3 different transits through his chart, and he's had a couple different eclipses that I've seen put people down permanently, if not hospitalization, death. So I don't know what's going on with him. World leaders have had body doubles forever. It's documented. So who the fuck knows? But he keeps looking terrible, but a lot of people don't notice how terrible he looks because, it's just all about, it's like, well, he's better than Orange Man, and they just love to hate Orange Man. So, you know, and that's an interesting thing about politics. Like, there's no charisma. Charismatic people, when they're part of a group, whether it's politics or a church or a sports team or whatever the hell. The leaders of that group, when they're charismatic, they're positive, and it's all about, man, we're doing some cool shit. Why don't you come with us and, join the winning team? Well, leaders who are not charismatic, they just have to be negative, and they have to just, what the hell is going on with the lighting in here? They have to bash other people. So, yeah, you're part of a political party or a church, and that's all they do. Well, they have no charisma. My light is being so freaking weird. All right, I think that's back to normal. I don't even know what the hell this thing's doing. Anyway, so yeah, it's like Mr. Biden, like the population, or at least half of the population can't really just look at him and the things he's been involved in and see him for what he is. So, but it's going to be interesting. I think more and more people are going to see it, and he's going to look worse and worse. And I think his own party's going to eventually throw him under the bus. So more drama with him. I'll get into the details of that later. Another thing here too with the nodes changing. We're going back in time a little bit. So sidereally, Rahu going to Pisces, K2 going to Virgo. In January 1968, the nodes went to these places. So 1968, what happened? You had massive rioting. You had leaders getting assassinated under very suspicious and dubious circumstances, which U.S. intelligence agencies were not only involved in, but responsible for. So Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy Jr., Malcolm X, 1968, those three leaders were taken out. So we could see something like this around the world. Hopefully not anywhere, but there's a potential for it. Maybe even in this country, I hope not. Now, another thing that happened in 1968, early February, you had the Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive was on the Chinese New Year in 1968. The Viet Cong, the guerrilla group within South Vietnam that was fighting against the South Vietnamese government and the American forces on behalf of the North Vietnamese cause and communism because of that. They launched a massive offensive against American and South Vietnamese forces all over Vietnam. So prior to February 1968, the American government and media was just peddling a bunch of happy horse shit about how the war in Vietnam was about to be won and, we're going to be big heroes just like Daddy in World War II. Well, then one night, it was during the customary ceasefire for the Chinese Lunar New Year in Vietnam. The Viet Cong organized attacks all over South Vietnam, caught the South Vietnamese and the American forces and their governments with their pants down. They got their nose bloodied. And after that, it was apparent that the war couldn't be won. There just wasn't the will to do it. So the Hamas attacks in Israel, it's interesting. On the verge of this node change, Hamas just pulls off this attack, and it's one of these intelligence oopsies, just like fucking 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. It's like they knew it was coming, but they're like, oops. There are a lot of people, like former Israeli military and intelligence people, who are they're like, with the surveillance capabilities over there, Israeli intelligence knows it when a mouse crosses the border from Gaza. So it's like, how the fuck did all those paragliders and all those people, all these armed men get across? Israel needs that war, and Israel, British intelligence, US intelligence, they're all sponsors of Hamas. This is what happens. You get war when the economy goes to shit and unemployment goes up. They got to keep people distracted. And in the case of a big war, they're just wanting to cull the parts of the population. We just passed November 11th. That was the Armistice Day in 1918 when World War I ended. World War I, the leadership in all the countries involved were that war was coordinated, in my opinion. The British, they did things that were either to get their own soldiers. The generals they were either acting ridiculously incompetently, which the English aristocracy is renowned for, ridiculous incompetence, or they were just trying to, cull the population. Now, before World War I, the economies in Europe had basically grown to their limit, and they were between 1910 and 1914, there was massive unemployment and civil unrest. In Britain, there were massive strikes, and the British Army was actually shooting at miners who were rioting. Not minors like children, but miners, guys who work in mines. So, the labor movements were raising a lot of hell. So I think all the countries in Europe needed that. And, Bolshevik communism kind of snuck in on the coattails of it. Nobody was expecting that, except for the bankers who were organizing it. So, yeah, I always think of that around this time of year. So, yeah, we got that going on. There's going to be a Sun-Mars conjunction, which happens every 2 years, mind you. But, with the placement of it and the aspects to it, it's just like we're going to see more just pissed off people, angry people. And then the moons, just in summary here. Let me take a look at this here. November 13th, what was that, yesterday? We had a new moon, sun-moon conjunct Mars in Libra. Lunar mansion called Dinas, which is the name for the war god Ares or Mars. Opposed Uranus, so definitely violence, disruptive violence stirring, but also people just wanting to act in order to make their lives better, and they need to be disruptive to do it. So there's that. And then let me see here. These notes are a little wacky. Yeah, and then a full moon on the 27th. So you got a full moon in a lunar mansion. The moon is in Pasiphae. So Pasiphae is the moon's exaltation in Taurus. The moon is exalted in the sign Taurus, but it's the moon's favorite little lunar mansion in the sign of Taurus. So Taurus is about materiality and resources and all that. So, I think one of the underlying things in people's anger and frustration is that they're scared about, their resources. So, when that happens, 10 degrees Taurus, the sun is in the opposite sign in Scorpio, 10 degrees Scorpio. It's going to be conjunct with Mars. So that's going to send some anger to this full moon. People are getting pissed off about the rising costs of food and interest rates for mortgages and rent and fuel, gasoline, petrol, diesel, whatever the hell you call it, whatever you use. So it's going to be a frustrated month. And, When you look at similar events in 2005, because the nodes were in the same place in 2005, because every 18 and a half years, the nodes make a full orbit. So in that year, you had the death of Pope John Paul and his funeral, Pope John Paul II. So could be the death of a religious leader of some sort, or at least some sort of like a cultural icon. YouTube launched, so we might see some new fancy, snazzy, I don't know, social media platform come about. The asteroid Eris was discovered by the Palomar Observatory out in California. Now this is interesting. And Eris has, been embraced by the whole astronomical and astrological community. Now, who is Eris? Mythologically, Eris was she was like the mistress of the golden apples, and she sowed, sort of discord and disagreement, and among the gods of Olympus. So she had these golden apples, and everyone wanted them, and they were basically competing for them, trying to outdo each other, trying to plot in order to get the apple. And the apple is always when you cut an apple open, it's got a pentagram, a 5-pointed star. So it's Venusian. It has to do with, with Venus. Venus is basically, it's called Asura Guru, is one of the names for it in Sanskrit. So it's the divine teacher here on Earth, because Venus is a terrestrial goddess rather than a celestial. So apples deal with enlightenment, balance, all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think with this sort of anniversary, with this nodal anniversary of Eris being discovered, this could be sort of a bookend, like the end of a wave function, the end of a time. And I think this could signal, kind of an ending to it could be another signal for an ending to the post 9/11 sort of like, dystopia world. And that's always a good thing. Saddam Hussein's trial began in 2005. So, I don't know, maybe some world leader is going to be so-called brought to justice. Saddam Hussein was brutal, but Iraq under him was better than it is now, because he kept the religious fundamentalist crazies, the terrorists, out of Iraq. So, sometimes the world needs bad men because worse men or women take over when that bad man is not in play anymore. So it's like, you can't, especially when someone hasn't done anything to you directly, you can't just go on crusades and topple governments and, just bitch about how horrible someone else is, because someone worse could come along. It's like if Donald Trump had been removed from office, you would have had Mike Pence, who's a fucking religious fundamentalist in office. So if you're gay, trans, you're a witchy, you're a witch, you're whatever, who doesn't like religious fundamentalism, you would have been in a worse position with President Pence. So you got to think about this. 2005, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter was launched. And this is interesting. There's been all this stuff going on with Mars, and they tell us Mars has no atmosphere, but then they say, look at the video that the drone helicopter on Mars just captured, and it's like, wait a minute, you can't fly a helicopter without an atmosphere because helicopters cause downward thrust by moving air downward. So who the hell knows? Maybe Deep State's gonna get desperate and try to pull off the H.G. Wells War of the Worlds nonsense. Try to tell us that Martians are invading. Who the hell knows? Um, and then too, when Rahu and Ketu were last in Pisces and Virgo, respectively, Pluto was downgraded from a planet status. So around 1930, 1931, Pluto was discovered and declared a planet, and then it was downgraded. Now, total Freudian slip within the scientific community, if you ask me, because Pluto's a god of the underworld, makes us deal with things that we don't want to deal with, uncomfortable emotions especially, in order to transform, to ascend, to become a higher version of ourselves. And so, when you look at the scientific community right now, highly globalist, they think there's just a technological solution for everything, a chemical solution for everything. There's no place for inner work, imagination, spirituality. So, as the world falls apart here, as the 20th century finally falls apart, we're going to have to face the truth about a bunch of happy horse shit we believe that wasn't true. People don't want to deal with that stuff. So it's like subconsciously, unconsciously, they're downgrading Pluto because they don't want to deal with that stuff. They're not consciously doing this because they don't know all these sort of symbolic right-brained meanings to Pluto. But unconsciously, subconsciously, they think they can run away from facing the facts in this world. And the fact is that the world as we know it is falling apart and a new world is beginning. So, yeah, pretty interesting stuff here. So that's the gist of the month. It's like, yeah, a lot of astrologers are like, oh my God, it's going to be unrest and violence. And it's like, well, what else is new? I'm not minimizing any of the suffering people are going through, but we're in one of those times, and it's like, well, no shit, Sherlock. So let's look at some individual days here, and I'm gonna wrap this up. I don't want to go past 40 minutes. I want to go work out. So November 3rd, beginning of the month, we had an interesting Venus opposed Neptune. Now again, Venus takes what? About a year and a half to make its orbit. So this happens periodically. But the lunar mansions are interesting. So Venus, which at the time was 1 degree Virgo, sidereal Virgo. It's in a lunar mansion, Hymenaeus. Hymenaeus is, this passion for relationships and marriages and, all that kind of thing. Has the passion for it. When it's out of balance, it can get a little codependent. And it'll keep a relationship together at any cost, even if it's getting abused. So it's opposed Neptune in Chimera. So Neptune is divine love. It can be divine epiphanies and revelations, but Neptune can also be, it's when we're too selfless, because an out of balance Neptune, it's a significator for religious fundamentalism, for cults. It's when you don't have a sense of self. So you basically give a blank check to whatever political or religious movement you're part of, and you say, I will do your will and I will sacrifice myself for this cause. So with those planets looking at each other in those lunar mansions, it's like there's this ideological, fundamentalist, kind of extremist temptation to just give ourselves over. And and there's a temptation to do this out of what we perceive as love. So that's pretty interesting. And Neptune being in Chimera. Chimera was a mythological creature that was what? It was like part goat, part lion, part dragon, and part serpent, part snake. It had all these different body parts and it had 3 heads. Any organism that is a combination of different organisms, especially these days where they can create these in labs, that's a chimera. So, when we look at the cooties crisis that came out of China, there are experts out there who have been doing science, life science, for decades, and they're saying this thing was a chimera. It's a bunch of different organisms merged into one. So who knows? And then that Venus that's looking at that Neptune, it's in conjunct with Rahu, the north node. So in conjunction, it's when planets, they're not up, they're 30 degrees off of an opposition. So instead of being 180 degrees apart looking at each other, they're either 150 or 210 degrees apart. So there's a lack of communication. And this causes uncertainty, causes setbacks. So Venus is in conjunct Rahu at this time. Rahu is a trickster. Rahu can be deceptive. So it's about this deceptive, it's like deceptive dynamics within group relationships, getting people to sacrifice themselves. So that's just ongoing, but it's going to be highlighted. Now, Neptune, which was involved in that, is in conjunct K2, which is in a lunar mansion called Vulcan, which is between Virgo and Libra. So Vulcan can be very superficial. It's very Venusian. It's all about the appearance of things. So this is about being deceived by the appearance of things through deception within group relationships. So, yeah. Be advised, pay attention. Okay, November 4th was a big day. Saturn went direct. Saturn was retrograde for a few months. Went direct at 6 degrees sidereal Aquarius. This is very special because America's natal sidereal moon, where the moon was physically in the sky on July 4th, 1776, was 7 degrees Aquarius. So Saturn went direct conjunct America's natal moon. BFD, big fucking deal, for real. Because Aquarius, for America's birth chart, is the 3rd house of media. The moon is the mind, the emotional, intuitive consciousness. Now, the moon is also, it's sort of our group consciousness and our habitual consciousness. So it's a subconscious part of ourselves that kind of goes with the group, goes with the flow, and does this reflexively. Whereas the sun is the conscious, very individual self. The moon is more group oriented. So having Saturn go direct here, Saturn is bringing karma for America, the media, for the national mind, which is steeped in information in the mass media. And being Aquarius, just for the whole world, it's bringing this karma. It's bringing a reality check to NGOs, large organizations, to we the people. So Saturn is bringing energy of awakening. And it's interesting too, at that 6 degrees, it's at the cusp between 2 lunar mansions. One is Muses, the other is Aegeon. The Muses were spiritual beings who inspired writers and poets and musicians and artists. So it's all about works of art that they convey very deep meanings. And an Aegeon, which follows it, is all about very deep emotional, spiritual insights. Aegeon was the residence of Poseidon or Neptune, the god of the ocean. And again, water is emotional. So it's like Saturn going direct there, it means that we're on the verge of more information coming out that really rocks the world and shakes the world. So it's just going to be these globalist political sleaze and these globalist financial and corporate sleaze that they're getting exposed for the things they've been doing. So that's very encouraging. November the 13th, that's that new moon I mentioned. 26 degrees sidereal Libra, conjunct Mars, which is at 28. Again, lunar mansion of Dinas. This is in at 28 degrees where Mars is on the day of the new moon. Dinas is the lunar mansion that Mars loves most. Capricorn is a sign of exaltation for Mars. Excuse me. I'm all fucked up. Forget I said Capricorn. Capricorn is the sign of exaltation for Mars, but that has nothing to do with this. Dinas is a very friendly lunar mansion for Mars because Dinas, again, is the name of the war god Mars, the war god Aries. So Mars is very capable here, and Mars wants to fight to win. So being in Libra, the sign of business, the sign of social relationships, people want to fight to bring about a new paradigm within relationships, within business. They're sick of the old. And then directly across from this, you've got, again, that retrograde Uranus, 26 Aries, it's in Vesta. Vesta is the goddess of the sacrificial fires in the temples. So it's like basically in this new moon, we're wanting to sacrifice the old, our old ideas, because again, Aries is our heads. So sacrificing old ideas to bring about new ways of exchange, new relationships, all that kind of thing. And then let me see, what was the other thing I wanted to talk about here? I think that was pretty much it with that. Okay. November the 18th, that is the Sun-Mars conjunction, 1 degree, sidereal Scorpio. That happens again, Sun-Mars conjunct every 2 years. Nothing particularly special about that, but we have we have them in Mercury, which is one of Mars' home signs, lends it a lot of power. And let me double check the lunar mansion. I think that's still in Dinas. Yes. So, still in Dinas, very strong lunar mansion from Mars. So, on that day, Mars is based, because again, Sun is the conscious individual self as well as the soul. Mars is giving all that power, that firepower to it, as the conscious individual self wants to assert its individuality. And then so Sun and Mars, you put those two together, you get courage, valor, possibly violence. People are feeling bold and they're ready to act. That Sun-Mars conjunction will be in conjunct, a lot of these in conjunctions, in conjunct the Gandanta Rahu, the Gandanta dragon's head north node of the moon, which is at 0 Aries. And it's been sitting there for months. So after eclipses, the nodes can sit for like 3 months. Getting ready to go to Pisces, but it's Gandanta. Gandanta, it's the cusp between a water and a fire sign. So the nodes always move backwards. So it's going from the fire sign Aries to the water sign Pisces. At that meeting point between water and fire, you get steam. You also get creation, because when you look in the Norse creation myth, life began because of the interaction between the water energy, the ice in the north, and the fire in the south. And in the middle, you get vapor and sparks, and life created. So these Gandantas, these bridges between water and fire signs, people get angry. They feel emotional pressure, and they just feel like they're going crazy, and they get impulsive, and they need to act. So you can see people acting rashly, but it's nothing new, right? Okay, and finally, the node change. So when the nodes change on this day, November 28th, Rahu goes to 29 Pisces, Ketu goes to 29 Virgo sidereally. Virgo will be conjunct within 1 degree that Venus. And they're both in Vulcan. So, again, Virgo, healthcare, caretakers, the public health system. Venus can be a caretaker, and Venus is about relationships, all about social dynamics. So this can be a breakdown about social dynamics. I mean, this can be a breakdown within social dynamics about public health, what it should be doing, what the truth is behind the things it has been trying to do. And this can also be, people out of their associations, their political associations, social, religious, just going together to sacrifice themselves to this public health establishment. And again, you've got that Uranus and Vesta, the goddess of the sacrificial flames. So, there's potential there. Okay. And then, let me look at something here. Now, on this day as well, when the nodes change signs, you're going to have a pretty strong square between, and this has been ongoing, but you got a square between Mars and Saturn. So Mars and Saturn square, this is a lot of tension. It leads to frustration because Saturn slows things down, holds things back. Mars wants to go. So it's like driving with your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. So you're like moving, you move forward, you stop, you move forward, you stop, that kind of thing. And then again, that's Saturn on the cusp between Muses and Aegeon. So media is going to start dropping bombs. It's going to, all of the bullshit that's been going on, the media is going to know it needs to release it. Otherwise, people are going to stop watching, stop listening. So they're going to try to save their own asses, and they're going to end up throwing a bunch of people in offices and, political offices, corporate offices under the bus. Because its time has come. And, Venus is still in conjunct that Uranus. So, we could see the fruits of this big campaign to put a prickly pear, a needle craft in every arm on the planet. We could start seeing the side effects of that. I wish that wasn't the case, but nature is very exact in her, what's the word I'm looking for? Nature is a very exact sort of taskmaster. Cause and effect is very strict, usually. All right. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Give this video a like, subscribe to my channel. It's very helpful. And if you want to see how you're affected through these times, I can do a reading for you. You can book on my website, and the URL for that is in the description. So, thanks for tuning in.